I came from New York just to be able to say that. So yes, I'm Hamid. I'm one of the product people at Trello. So today I'll be talking about how we build Trello. And by build, I don't mean what tools we use or what languages and all of that, because we have a very nice blog post that kind of outlines that. I want to talk more about how do we make decisions day to day, what principles we use, what processes, kind of how the company really runs. But before I get into that, I want to go over really what Trello is. So please raise your hand if you've used Trello before. Okay, so this is going to be kind of boring for a lot of you. But basically, Trello, if you've ever seen sticky notes on a wall, Trello is a digital version of that. You pick up a sticky note, you move it over, you put it down. It's tactile, it's awesome. And it's just a digital implementation of that in steroids. So you have a board has a bunch of lists in it, has a bunch of cards, and each card is a task. And the really cool thing is that you can open up these cards, right? So you open up a card, you can add comments, add people, you can use our Giphy power-up to attach GIFs. It's pretty awesome. And it turns out that this model actually is very powerful for a lot of things. So I'll just show you a few examples. So this is an example of an employee manual. So you can just use it to store information. So this is actually a copy of our own employee manual. You see there's a card for espresso training somewhere there. So we're very fanatical about coffee. You can use it to plan a marathon. So one of our VP of people, actually, this is her board. This is how she and her husband and her friends plan their marathons. So each card here is, the runs that they're planning and the lists and all of that. And then you can also use it to see what's going on with your company. Just get an instant perspective into how your company is doing. Or you can use it like Slack is using. So this is the Slack public platform roadmap. It's on Trello. You can just go and see it. You can see what's going on. It has descriptions. You can just see what Slack is going to be doing. And there are many ways to use Trello. If you want to see more of those, I won't bore you more, but go to that URL. There's many more examples. So this has been very powerful, and we've seen a lot of traction. So we have well over 14 million users. We're adding 150,000 per week. We have 72 employees, and I actually have to calculate that number because we added 4 people last week and we added 4 people this week. And I had to figure out when everybody was starting. So today we have people starting. We have I think a few people start tomorrow. In a few weeks we'll be over 80. So we're growing very quickly. We recently crossed 10 million ARR, so it's annual recurring revenue. And that is triple what it was beginning of last fall. So that's less than half a year, tripling revenue. We're in 21 languages, not in Croatian unfortunately yet, but we're working on that. And then we also, we're very proud of this, we only have 1 spokeshusky, and we're also the only company in the world that has a spokeshusky. So if you use Trello, you've seen a little cute dog pop up sometimes, and maybe you love him, maybe you hate him. But it's an actual real dog. We love him. His name is Taco. He's Joel Spolsky's dog, and he's really cute. So you're probably wondering, why am I talking about dogs? I thought you were going to talk about how you build Trello, right? Well, it's actually a very important part of our history. And I really couldn't talk about how we make Trello without telling you how we originally started. Trello was a side project done by 2 people at Fall Creek Software. So we have these things called Creek Weeks, where you can just take a week and go do whatever you want. So Joel had this thing where he was like, I have a tough time seeing what's going on in the company, and he had this thing called 5 things. Like, you can only be working on 5 things at a time. What that means actually, you were working on 2 things, 2 were kind of upcoming, and then 1 was the thing that you're never ever going to get to, but you still want to say that I'm going to be able to do it because people are like that. So that Creek Week was spent to make a tool to help enable that. And that's how Trello was born. It's actually called Trellis. And the related taco story was that instead of a dog, we initially had a manatee for a mascot. It was a planetee, the planning manatee. And then we realized that was awful. So we're like, just use the dog. That's really funny. So we launched in tech just around 2011. Split out as our own company in 2014. And the big thing for us that we decided very early on is that Trello was going to be a very horizontal tool. It was going to be something that everybody could use. I don't know how familiar you are with Fall Creek Software, but it made... Oh, sorry, they want to change my microphone. Does it work? Yeah, I think so. At least the clicker is working. I don't know if you ever wore this, but if you ever watched Battlestar Galactica, you know the Cylons, it feels like that. You're like, no, no. Sorry, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, the history. Yeah, we all love Battlestar Galactica, we're nerds, so actually there's more about that later. But the goal of the project was, you know, be able to instantly, maximum of 2 seconds, so that's the definition of instantly, but just be able to instantly see what's going on with anything. And get a shared perspective on any project or anything. So we still have that same exact goal. So it was, we want to get 100 million users, we want to get 1% of them paying, and the way we're going to do that is we're going to provide people with a visual collaboration tool that provides a shared perspective on any project. So this poses a few challenges, because when you build a horizontal tool, it has so many uses, so that basically means that everything that you do has to work for every single use case. And I know that a lot of you probably were like, oh, I wish Trello had, you know, developer content, so I wish it had agile Kanban boards with super extra duper points. But we're never going to do that, because that would pigeonhole Trello into being a developer tool. And yes, we could make a lot of money doing that, but Trello is a list of lists, a collaborative list of lists, and it's not a Kanban tool. That's why we haven't done that. So it makes it very challenging to do that sort of little thing. And so we focus on little fun things a bunch, and just making Trello fun to use. And then one other thing that kind of makes this a bit more challenging for us as well in the process of building Trello is Trello is a remote company. And we have a lot of company principles as well, and this is one of them. That the person with the most information makes the decision. So you have a remote company, everybody's able to do, you know, what they want and make the decisions around the work that they're doing. Management is a support function, so we kind of have this inverted thing where the CEO is the lowest person because all he does is around make sure that the lunch is paid or whatever. And nobody really dictates what you do, so basically what we try to do is we just hire the best people we can and then we let them do their jobs, which apparently is novel for a lot of people. But it makes it hard occasionally to stay to your vision, because if you have 100 people all working on an idea of something, they will have slightly different ideas what that is, and you can get divergence, and that's how you get products that have rough edges or are weird to use, or there are just like multiple products at all. I don't know if you ever used an app, but like it feels like every other screen was done by a different person, and they just like have different patterns and everything, and they kind of do different things. Like some might have more settings than others. This is how you get to that. So then the big thing for us is, how do we deliver our original vision of being able to instantly tell what's going on with any project? Just with an overview, have it be widely useful, make the business model, which is 100 million users, 1% paying. How do we do that? And we don't do it with the hard and fast rules. We have an inverted management structure. It's not one person's job to dictate. So what we have instead is a set of guiding principles. The things that we kind of keep in mind when we make Trello and what we talk about and how we make decisions. And this actually helps quite a bit, because people that you hire are smart. You don't need to tell them what to do. You just need to make sure that the people align on what they're building, and then it will just work out. You still have a lot of room for creativity, and the principles kind of provide a framework for making decisions around the product. And I love doing these even for features that I personally manage myself, and I'll show you a few examples. So we had a few original principles actually even when we built Trello. One was that Trello was going to be free. That was a principle. So whenever we talk about charging for something, it was like, does that make Trello into a non-free tool? And then we just kind of cut it. And the interesting thing about free for us is that it greatly reduced friction. I mean, obviously, it greatly reduced friction to adoption and accelerated our growth. We actually didn't have any marketing, because we would say that making Trello free is our marketing. There was also this whole thing that I mentioned a few times around 100 million users, 1% of them paying, which that basically means is that Trello is not a tool for X or Y or Z. It is a tool that can give you a perspective with X, Y, and Z. And that has really helped a lot when you're kind of going through and deciding, do I add this feature? So when we talk about adding a done status, right? So if you're using Trello for project management, done is awesome. But if you're not, if you're using it for an employee manual, how do you say a card is done if it's an employee manual? Right? And that's why we haven't added done yet. It's like we know that it's a problem. We really, really want to solve it. But we haven't found a way to do it in a way that fits with the original philosophy of Trello. And it makes it actually easier to say no sometimes. The other few big ones that were kind of big in 2011 was that we would only build for the latest technology. So we cut IE, I forget which one, but whichever one everybody wanted to cut, we would just said we're just going to cut it. We've done the same thing with the old Android phones. We just said we're going to cut it. Trello only works for the latest technology. We used Mongo, CoffeeScript, Node back when they were still in their infancy, and we cut ourselves many times. So we trailblazed quite a bit. And the other one also that was also powerful for us is that Trello works on any device. And which is why we have, hopefully, really, really, really good mobile apps, which is an advantage for some of our competitors, because we invested early in that. And so those were the original ones. Since then, we've also developed a few other ones that are more informal, if you will, and they kind of organically grew out of people making decisions along the way, of interpreting that original 100 million users, 1% paying, very horizontal tool. And one of my favorite ones is, when you build something, make sure that you delight users. So Trello is a tool that's used a lot for work, and work is very boring, right? And I'm sure if you use bug trackers or any other project management tools or whatever, it's all very boring. There's checkboxes and you enter stuff and you say add and it just looks like boring. You just want to shoot yourself in the head while you're using it. Because it's not fun to use. It doesn't give you any reward, right? And it just feels like work. And this one actually came out of everybody makes a decision, is because if you're a developer and you're coding and you have a clever thing that you want to do, you're able to just do it because you don't need somebody to tell you yes or no. And because you're the person working on that, you make the decision. And this is one of those examples, right? If you look at our login forms, we have a bunch of placeholders, right? So this is Planet Express. If you love Futurama, you'll see that. We also have FBI ones, Game of Thrones ones, and whatever. So earlier I was talking about Battlestar Galactica. We're all obviously huge nerds. So if you're a nerd and you get this, you love it because you're like, ooh, that's cool, right? If you don't get it, you just think it's a regular placeholder and it's fine. And the other place that this actually was very, very helpful for us was when we were localizing Trello. So there's this interesting thing about localization. I don't know if you ever used an app in your own language and it felt alien. It felt like somebody just translated it. That's because they just translated it. They didn't consider the cultural aspects of it, the patterns, or whatever. It didn't feel like somebody from your country made that app. It felt it was some big company paid somebody else to translate it, right? And the process of making sure that your app is not one of those is called tropicalization. So you basically adopt your app to the culture. And this is one of the ways that we did that. We also have fun placeholders for French and a few other languages. So I don't know if many of you recognize the reference, but I don't know if you've seen that French movie called Le Visiteur, where a bunch of two men from the Middle Ages go into present-day France and they attack cars and y'all say, okay. It's a great movie. Go see it. But that was a reference, right? So if you're French, that's one of your favorite movies or whatever, you recognize it. And now all of a sudden, Trello feels more personal to you. It doesn't feel like somebody just took a boring project management organizational app and translated it. It feels like somebody, sitting in an office, loves that movie, like you do, added this little reference. And that's great. And actually, our translators love doing this. This is the most work they put into anything, more than translating words or whatever. And it's great. And we also do a bunch of other things, like in the product itself. That may not be very discoverable, but when you discover them, they're like, ooh, that was cool and neat. So this is one example. If you copy paste something from Google Sheets or Excel, or anything that has new lines in it, and you go into add a card, we're probably thinking like, well, you probably have a list of stuff, so we probably want you to make more cards than one for that. And we just let you know, like, would you like to do that? So this is not a thing that you expect, right? When you copy paste something, you click add card, you expect it to just add a card. But Trello here, one of our developers just went a little step further and be like, huh, well, this would actually work better if it did this. And then they just did it. And then this is one of the things that kind of makes people really like Trello. So there's a bunch of these little things everywhere. The other one is making Trello fun and personal. And this goes back into the thing earlier that I was saying about how work is boring. So we want to make Trello not boring. And so that's why we do things like board backgrounds and putting little pictures on front of cards and putting little stickers everywhere. Because what that actually does is that it takes this boring app, Trello, which is the regular ones, and it makes it into your app. Because whenever you make something personal, you feel more of an emotional connection to it. It's not Trello, it's your Trello, right? And I'm going to illustrate this, and I think it's kind of like very abstract without seeing it. So this is a Hawaii vacation board that we have, an example one. And you can see it kind of looks a bit like a mess, right? So somebody here added a picture of that island, or that sunset, because that's the picture they took when they were last in Hawaii, and they put it as the board background. So now every time they look at that board, they're reminded of how awesome it was. And it creates a more of a personal connection with the tool. They can be able to put pictures on top of things. There's Taco again when he was a little puppy. Husky puppies are the cutest thing in the world. And a bunch of pictures, and it creates that emotional connection. So what I actually did is I went back and I removed all of that. So I took the exact same board, I copied it, and I got rid of the board background, and I got rid of all of the pictures and all of that, right? So this kind of looks like a boring tool, right? So here they are side by side. So I don't know about you, but when I see them side by side, they feel like two completely different things, right? Right? Yeah. Two completely different tools. One of them looks cleaner, whatever, the other one's a little messy, but I feel more connected to the one that has the picture of my cute dog and the picture of that sunset that I took. And we actually see people do this, right? So this person, they made all of their boards have pictures of scenes from Karate Kid, one of their favorite movies, and now they associate Trello with their tool. And we actually see this a lot with people, is that the board backgrounds are very powerful because a lot of our users don't really say that I have a board called project management. They say I have a board, a blue board or an orange board or a picture with a cat, or like my partnership board that has the Daft Punk background. And I don't think of like, oh, it's a partnership board. I think it's the Daft Punk board. And it's still, again, it creates more of that connection. You do the same thing with stickers. And I really do think those stickers will make her team a lot more productive in using Trello stickers, probably not doing their work. But it's fun, right? It helps people create a culture. And I'm not just screwing around here. There's like an actual science reason behind this. And it's this. So this is a molecule called dopamine. Yeah, you know what it is. So every time that you do something rewarding, every time you ship something, or you play soccer and you score that beautiful goal, you get a little bit of this. And it makes you feel good. And it's actually, the evolution of it was that the reward center of the human brain, anytime that you do something good, it rewards you a little bit, so you seek it out. And it releases a little bit of it. And then whenever you delight your users, they get a little bit of this. And that's how you're able to create an emotional connection with an app. And we're lucky that, we kind of stumbled upon it. And then I made these slides after that to explain the fact, but we stumbled upon it, right? Because we were just like, we're a couple people just writing some code and being fun and whatever, and it worked out well. And then we have a lot of tweets like this. People really love Trello, and we're very lucky and honored to have that. But if you're thinking they're going just like, oh, I'm just going to put pictures of cats and dogs everywhere and do a bunch of stuff, you're going to end up with this. So don't go back and just screw up your tool. Like, know your users, know what they want, know their problems. This was actually the problem of Microsoft Office is too complicated to use, so let's make it even worse by adding another feature that tries to help you use it, but really doesn't. It just gets in your way. So don't do Clippy. Add a few little features. It's okay to be bold and like risk a few things, right? Oh, I was battling the clicker. I didn't realize that it didn't move over, but that's Clippy. That's what I was talking about. So don't do that. All the stuff I said before that meant for that. So know your users. That is the big. Know their problems and what they need and what they want. And knowing your users, actually, it doesn't mean just like
knowing who they are, like, oh, my target is developers. I mean, like, go look at, look at your data, look how people are using your tool. Go out and talk to people. Talk to users. Just sit them down for an hour and let them complain about your tool. Like, what do they wish it had? And get to the bottom of things. Like, what problems are they facing? For us, the Trello support is part of our product team, and they're able to push up things that people see. And the thing for Trello and for me personally, given that Trello is so horizontal, every time I talk to a user, I am surprised, one, how well they use Trello, because I think most Trello users use Trello better than we do. And that's probably not a good thing to say, but yeah, they do. They use it better than we do. And I'm always surprised by the things that they use and how they use them. So there's this big sports team in the US. They use Trello to manage their video production. And they have used Trello to manage which projects they're managing or whatever. But the thing that surprised me is, like, we added stickers, which were a little fun feature, right? We were like, oh, nobody's going to use it just for fun. And it turns out that stickers are, like, super duper important to their workflow, because like I said, they use them to manage projects, and in order to get approval for a project, the way that you get approval from the manager is that the manager adds a thumbs up sticker on the card. So they would actually run to the office of the manager and say, hey, can I get a thumbs up? And they'd be like, okay, hold on, and they add it on, right? It's very, very surprising, and I'm sure if you went out and talked to users, you would be shocked by how well people use your tool, but also how little you knew about the way that your tool could be used. And you can also do this with data, right? Data is very helpful in figuring out general patterns and noticing little problem areas and seeing where you're doing well or bad. But data is also very dangerous, because data can lie to you. Analyzing data is very hard. There's a thing called omitted variable bias, which basically means that all of your models are incorrect. And it's very easy to lie with data. And I could spend hours talking about this, but I'm just going to point out this one quote. So before the first iPhone came out, Apple went to Intel and they were like, hey, can you make these chips for us for this thing we're releasing? And then Intel went back, and then they did their cost-benefit analysis. And they figured out it's recommending how much money it would cost us, and there was a marketing impact to it because Intel didn't want to be a fabricator of chips. They wanted to, like, be a designer of chips. And then the data came back to the CEO, and he looked at it and he was like, well, the data says that we can't make money on this, right? Because you can't make it up on volume, the cost is too much. And then they said no. But his gut said, yes, you should go for it. Because the data was wrong. It turns out actually that the cost of making the ARM chips was lower than making the x86 chips, which what Intel cost estimates I think were based on. And that the volume, the iPhone, it was 100 times what they projected. So the data said one thing, and the CEO decided to do another thing based on the data, but his gut said to go otherwise. Data lied to him, and now he's actually the former Intel CEO. I don't know if you saw in the news, but recently Intel cut 12,000 jobs because they lost mobile. And if that CEO went with his gut, they probably wouldn't have cut those jobs, and they would be doing much better. But then also it's kind of saying, like, hindsight is 20/20, right? So don't just, like, ignore data, but also don't be a slave to it. Like, mix and match it too. If something seems wrong, investigate it further. And the nice thing about data actually is that it's helpful in helping you solve real problems. And it's basically saying, like, how many people do have this problem. And then you kind of use that, or this is how we do it, and we use the data to identify a few problem areas. And then we say, like, oh, we should dig into this. And then we go out and talk to the users, right? And then when you talk to the users, what we find is that the users really want to help you. And they will offer the best solution that they have based on the information that they have. And users will tell you, give me feature X. They won't tell you, I have a problem, can you solve it for me? So if you just go blindly and you implement features that the users want, you'll end up with a tool that is a little weird. And actually, this was one of the mistakes that I made very early on, because I was like, oh my God, everybody wants my cards. I was like, we must do it, and we did it, and now we're trying to kill it because it's not very useful. So, we have these patterns, right? We have, these are just 3 examples, right? But one user is like, oh, I want my cards, and the other one was reporting, and the other one wants a Facebook newsfeed, right? So you could implement those 3 features, and those 3 users would be happy. But there is a problem. One level above that, it's like a problem tree. If you go up 1 level, the core thing that the user is saying here is, Trello makes it hard for me to see the things that I want to see. It doesn't give me insight when I first open it. So the first user, they care about the cards. They say my cards because they're like, oh, I think this is how I would solve that problem. And the second user is like, oh, I want a report. And the third user is like, oh, I just want a newsfeed. The core problem to solve here is making Trello be better at that, at showing you the data when you first open it that you care about. And that doesn't mean that your users are, you should say, oh, the users don't know anything. It just means that it's your job as a product person to figure out what's going on. So the next thing that we do is that we do all of this data stuff, and we figure out, talk to the users, and we figure out what the problems are. And we kind of are at this point, we're like, all right, so no, we want to do this thing, right? And the next step is very important. To just ignore everything. And what I mean here is not just say, oh, that was all dumb. It means ignoring the assumptions that you have about a certain way that something has to be. Because those assumptions will be the thing that gets you. So don't assume that Trello has to have cards, or don't assume that it has to only work this way, or that the way that it's always been done, so it must be right. Don't do that. Because that's how you build a better horse cart, right? This is the best horse cart in the history of the world. But you're like, we need we're building this transportation thing. It has horses, so let's make the wheels radius a little different because that makes it easier to turn. Let's put a little, and all of that. And the core assumption, you have to be horse-powered, right? Meanwhile, your competitors are building these things. And then you just know it, like, oh God, we're such idiots. Or you might just miss it saying like, oh, that will never work. And then you lose in the marketplace. So the question that I ask the most at Trello is, what's the craziest thing that you can think of? So this means basically that whenever I see a mock-up or talk to somebody, I just say, what is the craziest thing you're thinking of? Because that's basically saying, ignore the assumptions or whatever. Like, what if we didn't need to have horses? What would we be powered by? Jet engines or whatever? Yeah, and that's fine. What you really want to do is create a safe space for those ideas, that there are no bad ideas. Because otherwise people don't have room to be creative. And if people are not creative, they just think about making the better horse cart, or they'll just look at the data and make the decision, and they won't go with their gut when they know that they're right or wrong. And the thing about crazy ideas is that they're always crazy until they're not. And Larry Page is the CEO, chairman of Google now. I forget, he switched roles. The thing with the crazy ideas is you'll have 100 ideas, and 95 of them will be absolutely awful. Just awful. You should never do them. 3 will be okay, 1 will be good, and then 1 will be amazing. 1 will be the one that's like the car thing. And the thing that sucks about it is that you never actually know which one's which, right? Like Snapchat came out and everybody was like, oh, it's dumb. But now it's just like dominating everything, and there's like business apps. There's an app called Confide that builds on the same model. So it was a crazy idea, and it turned out to work. The people really solved people's problems. But that's okay. It's very hard. But the thing that you also do, when I say, what's the craziest thing that might work, I also say, what is the craziest way we can possibly validate this idea, right? Because it turns out actually that most of the time to just test something, you don't need to do that much. Like you can literally put a static image in your app, show it to like a small number of users, and just say if they tap this button, then it works. And the button doesn't have to actually work. You can just set user tests and all of that. Usertesting.com is great for this. You just have people try out your crazy idea and see if it works. And that's better because like, you don't really want to spend all your time building a better horse car when you could have just tested the car with, really quickly. And the thing that I feel like illustrates this the best is the story of BlackBerry. My talk actually was going to have many, many, many more slides on this. And there's a really good book called Design of Business that I suggest you read because it has a story here. But basically what BlackBerry did is they made two very large assumptions. First, they had this physical keyboard and it was awesome and it was a real innovation when they first did it. And they were kind of stuck on it. The second one is they assumed that their customers were not people buying the phones, but they were actually the carriers. So they actually were able to build a better browser than they had, but they did not because they thought that their customers, the carriers, wouldn't want it because it would overload their networks. So then Apple came out with the iPhone. They got rid of the keyboard, right? And everybody was like, and I was like this, honestly. It was like, oh, this will never work. It'll be so weird. Like, how can you know where you're typing? You need tactile feedback or whatever. And then the other thing that they also did is they made it a computer. It could actually had a full browser in it and whatever. And the BlackBerry people were just like, oh, this is just going to be crazy. Nobody's going to buy these things because it's missing the keyboard. And the carriers don't want to sell them because it's going to crash their networks. It turns out actually that the iPhone did crash AT&T's network when it came out, but it didn't matter. So they had these core assumptions that were proven incorrect. And then BlackBerry tried to make another phone called the Storm, and they still stuck to it. They made this crazy, awful contraption where the screen would press in because they still wanted to have the physical keyboard. It was a touchscreen phone, but it had a physical keyboard where it pressed in. They couldn't get away from it even when they saw that their numbers were dying. So like, if you have a holy cow, don't be afraid to kill it. Like, innovation moves much faster than you do, and you can't be just stuck in one place. Okay, so that was a lot of stuff about a lot of stuff. And those were our guiding principles, the things that we talk about, do crazy things, and a bunch of other things. And I want to talk a little about process, because I think I get a lot of questions around that. And people ask me, do you guys use iterative agile waterfall with 3-week sprints, or do you prefer 2.5-week sprints? And basically, we don't do any of that. We let teams figure out the way they want to work. So really, we don't really have much process in the way of things. The few things that we do have is this. So basically, we have cross-functional teams tasked with achieving certain goals, measured by certain results by a certain date. And the way that cross-functional team does it, it doesn't matter. If they want to use waterfall because that's what they want to do, whatever, that's fine. We don't care. Because again, person with the most information makes the decision, and you hire a lot of smart people, and they're in a team, and however they want to work, because they're smart and they know the problem space better than you do, that's fine. And we actually used to be organized a little differently, where we had, traditional departments, and they were kind of all going around whatever. And it actually turned out to be very hard to push through big projects, like the one that I'm going to talk about a little bit later, just because the communication overhead was too large and whatever. So we started doing these cross-functional teams, where basically this is what it means, is that you have teams that cut across disciplines. So that it's not that you have a design lead, and then anytime if you're working on a feature, you have to go to the design lead and then go to the designer to get that. It's more like the team is composed of people from different disciplines. It's like mini little companies inside the company. And then we also add a product to that. So the job of product is to basically run around and do the communication aspects of it. And this is kind of how the division of responsibilities falls within a cross-functional team, is that the PM, or the product manager, they own the outcomes and priorities. So they basically own the definition of the problem and what are the key results and all of that. If you know OKRs, this is going to be very familiar to you. Design owns the user experience, and that doesn't mean just how things look. They own the experience. And engineering owns how it's built. But everybody has input at all stages, right? Just because you're a developer doesn't mean you can't try your hand in making a mock-up or whatever, or the other way around. And then one thing that I want to say around deadlines is that I feel like a lot of people get this wrong, and we definitely got it wrong initially, was in order to meet a deadline, people will say like, oh, it's okay for it to have these weird bugs, but we need to get all the features in. And that's the wrong way to go about it, because that's going to create a lot of paper cuts. You know earlier how I was talking about the little delighters that make people feel good about using your app? When you cut quality, it's like the inverse of that. When you use an app and it just gets in your way, and you're like, but why does it matter if my credit card number has dashes in it or whatever? And you're just not able to figure out how to put the thing in there, and it does all these weird things, and you're like, and that was somebody saying basically, we have a deadline, we need to get all the features in. So in order to meet a deadline, what we like to do is cut the scope. So we will cut entire features before we say, let's ship something that we feel like is not good enough in order to meet this deadline. And it works well. And that's also tech debt falls into this. So don't add tech debt in order to meet a deadline. Like tech debt is very, 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 very important. Make sure you address it. So what does it look like when you put all of that together? So what I'm going to talk about is a feature that I've been working on, and it's very dear to my heart, and it's called Sync. Since a lot of you use Trello, I hope that you use it on your phones, and you probably know that it mostly requires a really solid network connection to work well. So that is basically Sync is solving that problem, and it's part of actually a bigger effort for us called Mobile First, which is making Trello work well for people whose only computer is a phone, and the first thing and the most important thing we can do is sync. So what we did was we set up some of those goals and results. And this wasn't something that just like somebody just plopped down. You know, we had a big, huge Trello board, and this is like the things that we identified. So you can see that the main goal is make Trello work well regardless of connectivity. And the goal, and this is basically based on OKRs, is that in that system, the goal is supposed to be inspirational and something you can kind of rally a team around. It doesn't say like increase thing X by Y%. That doesn't really make people want to get up out of the bed in the morning. And then the results are the things that are very measurable. And the results are meant to be the thing that whenever, no matter what your role is, you can come in and then you look at it and there is a number or a thing and you're able to push forwards to it. So we say things like that top 20% things work perfectly online or offline. It doesn't really matter what your connection is. So as a developer, you come in and you're like, I don't know what I need to do. Where you're like, well, there's just like 2 things left. So I'll just pick one. And then you don't really need managers that much, right? Because you just have these results and people just drive towards the thing. The next one is basically 80% of the content that when you view it is up to date. So if you ever get a push notification, then you tap it and then you lose connection and it's just kind of like, oh, I can't see anything. It was very important. I need to reply to that. And then basically the last one is fixing the thing that I said earlier about when the app gets in your way, like it loses your data, make sure that we don't do that. That fewer than 1% of edits made offline fail. And we have them very visible. This is a screenshot of our main sync board, and they're like very high up. We have checklists, and you can see how many things work on each one. And then we have a bunch of core principles for sync as well. That Trello is real time always, whether or not you have a network connection. That sync is core to Trello. It's not a setting you turn on and off. That the users must trust Trello completely. So we cannot use people's data because if you can't trust a tool like Trello always, you can never trust it. And just keep it simple. Don't add a bunch of UI that you don't need. And then we also, we didn't just come up with these randomly. Like, we talked to our users. So this is my boarding pass when I went to Rio with Adam, one of our designers. And we just were there for 2 weeks, and I bought a Moto G and used it. And the thing that I actually learned there was that I had a preconception of what a bad network or an interesting network setup would look like. And I thought that you would just open your phone and see you have no network. But if you look at this, actually, I looked up weather and it says that I'm offline completely, but I have full network connectivity. I would have never thought of realized that. And your devices will lie to you. Your gut feeling sometimes will be wrong, and that's why you talk to your users. And the other thing that, since we're a remote company, it's actually really awesome for us to just get together and work together sometimes. So this is us. That's Adam. You can't really see it well, but we're working together and we're figuring out sync. And we would just like, after we would talk to a user, we would go out, compare our notes, and just discuss a bunch of things. So it really, 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 really helped us. Also, it didn't hurt that Rio has amazing beaches. If you've never been, I strongly recommend it. So to kind of wrap things up, commit to your vision. Like your original goal, don't lose sight of it. Don't get sidetracked. Sometimes you'll have an opportunity to make a lot of money by doing a thing that compromises your vision. I would say don't do it, but don't do it, and also don't know why you're not doing it. Have a few guiding principles rather than hard rules. That kind of goes again with the vision. It just gets derived from it. Let people do their jobs. Like your job, if you're a manager, your job is not to ask everybody what they're working on every single day and poke and prod them and say, do it exactly this way. Your job is to make sure that the people working for you, or with you rather, have the tools that they need. And they have the freedom to do whatever. And it's okay for them to just go away for a week and just seem like they're not doing anything, because they'll come up with a crazy idea that works well. Do things that matter. Again, look at your vision, look at the data. What is the thing that has the most impact? And choose to do the hard things, right? If you think like, oh, what if we didn't need to have horses for our horse cart? Like, push that forward, because that's how you're gonna finish up, make that transformative change. And let loose, try crazy things and whatever. And then finally, all of this stuff is things that we've learned by trial and fire, that the only constant thing that we found is that things change a lot. And we didn't do things like this 6 months ago, and we'll definitely not be doing them 6 months from now, because processes adapt, what your tool is adapts. Like there's this huge new push into AI and VR and conversational UIs. And one of the things about Trello is that it's very, very visual, right? So then the question for us is like, how do we make Trello deliver that same perspective in a medium that doesn't have the same visual thing? And if we just had a core assumption that it has to be visual, we would lose, right? That would be our physical keyboard. And that's it. Thank you very much. We have a platform, and we're also hiring.